Welcome back to Real Crime Stories, the podcast where we bring you crime stories from around the world. Just past 11 p.m. on a quiet December night in Las Vegas, a young military family settled into what seemed like another ordinary evening. Dinner had been shared, the children were asleep, and the father prepared for another late shift. But as he stepped into the cool night air, the stillness was shattered. Violence erupted without warning, echoing through the neighborhood. In moments, a home once defined by safety and love became a scene of chaos and terror. What unfolded that night would reveal hidden secrets, unexpected betrayals, and a conspiracy no one saw coming. Born on February 12, 1982, on the island of Guam, Nathan Payet grew up surrounded by ocean air and deep-rooted traditions of family and community. One of 5 children raised by Mateo and Carmelina Payet, he was known from an early age for his warmth, generosity, and infectious energy. Friends and family remembered him as respectful and devoted, a son who supported his parents, a brother always willing to help, and a friend who could light up any room. At cultural gatherings, Nathan stood out as a joyful dancer, moving with pride in his heritage. Guam shaped who he was. He spent his free time surfing and paddleboarding across turquoise waters, finding peace along the shoreline. As a teenager, he fell in love with Michelle, his high school sweetheart and future wife. They began building a life together young, welcoming their first child while still in their teens, bound by devotion and determination. In April 2002, Nathan enlisted in the United States Air Force, beginning a career that would take him far from home, but never far from his family. His first assignment brought him to Alaska, where he worked in aircraft weapons support, adapting quickly to the stark contrast from island life. In 2006, he transferred to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona, where he rose to Chief of Weapons Loading for the Thunderbolt Ground Attack Squadron. That same year, he married Michelle and welcomed their second child. Nathan's career continued to advance. By 2007, he was training in logistics and materials management, later serving as an entry supervisor at Nellis Air Force Base. He earned promotion to junior non-commissioned officer in charge of maintenance supply, overseeing critical support operations. His service during the Iraq War further cemented his reputation as disciplined, loyal, and proud to serve. By the time he returned to Las Vegas, Nathan and Michelle were raising 4 children. Their family was the center of his life. Outside of duty hours, he coached a local Dodgers t-ball team, worked night shifts to earn extra income, and did everything possible to provide for his growing household. Michelle managed the home, cared for the children, and worked in telemarketing, supporting Nathan through the pressures of military life. Approaching his 28th birthday, Nathan held the rank of technical sergeant. On the surface, life appeared steady and full, defined by sacrifice, hard work, and family. December 1st, 2010 began no differently. Michelle came home early, feeling unwell. The family shared dinner, spent time together, and Nathan followed his routine, drifting into a short nap in the living room. The evening was calm, with no sign of the tragedy about to unfold. When his alarm failed to go off, Nathan jolted awake at 11 p.m. Realizing he was late for his shift, he rushed to get dressed, pulling on his camouflage uniform before heading out the door around 11:30. Moments later, the quiet night exploded. Multiple gunshots rang out, tearing through the silence of the neighborhood. Nathan staggered back into the house, gravely wounded. He had been shot 5 times. He collapsed inside, leaving his wife and children frozen in shock and terror. Michelle frantically dialed 911 as blood spread across the floor. The operator instructed her to begin CPR, but despite the efforts of first responders, Nathan was pronounced dead. The scene was horrific. The garage door stood open, blood smeared across the floor and walls, even soaking into Nathan's workout bench. Inside the vehicle, more blood marked the violence of the attack. His blood-stained uniform lay on the floor where paramedics had tried and failed to save him. Neighbors who once believed they lived on a safe, quiet street stood in disbelief. How could such brutality strike a suburban Las Vegas neighborhood? For Michelle and the children, the loss was immeasurable. Nathan had been their protector, their provider, their foundation. Investigators immediately focused on Nathan's final hours. Michelle, the primary witness, described a day that began normally and ended in catastrophe. She recalled hearing 2 sharp bangs just after Nathan stepped outside, but fear kept her from looking out. The children were startled, and she focused on calming them. Moments later, Nathan stumbled back through the door and collapsed. At the scene, detectives found Nathan's wallet, keys, and personal belongings untouched. Nothing had been stolen. It was the first clear indication that this was not a random robbery. Whoever pulled the trigger had come with one purpose: to kill Nathan. Investigators believed the shooter may have been lying in wait, concealed across the street near 2 vacant, darkened homes. The timing suggested planning. The killer appeared to know Nathan's schedule and struck at the exact moment he was most vulnerable. Still, detectives explored every possibility. They questioned whether Nathan had hidden troubles, gambling debts, a loan shark, or even an affair. But his phone told a different story. There were no suspicious contacts, no secret messages, no unexplained financial activity, only photos of his wife and children. To investigators, it reinforced what everyone believed. Nathan was a devoted husband, a loving father, a man with no secret life. As police canvassed the neighborhood, new leads emerged. Several witnesses reported seeing a black car speeding away after the gunshots. Others described a man in a brown or tan hoodie fleeing on foot. It was the first fragile trail to follow. News of the murder reached Guam almost immediately. Nathan's parents, Mateo and Carmelina, were shattered. They boarded the first available flight to Las Vegas. His mother wept the entire journey, unable to accept that her son was gone. When she arrived, Michelle collapsed into her arms. Nathan's brother Eric and sister-in-law Veronica also came to support the family, but soon found themselves questioned by detectives. When asked about Nathan and Michelle's marriage, Veronica hesitated. On the surface, the relationship appeared solid, but during Thanksgiving, just days earlier, she had sensed something was wrong. At the family gathering, the warmth between them seemed strained. It felt, she said, as though they were merely tolerating one another.
Eric told detectives he had noticed the family's pantry and refrigerator were nearly empty, a sign of growing financial strain. Michelle later confirmed this during a follow-up interview, admitting the family was struggling financially. One reason Nathan had been working exhausting double shifts. She also acknowledged that a coworker from her telemarketing job drove a vehicle resembling the black car seen near the crime scene. Under questioning, Michelle admitted to occasional flirting with men at work, revealing cracks in the marriage that investigators had not previously known. This led detectives to Michael Rodriguez, a 31-year-old coworker of Michelle's with a criminal history that included forgery and theft. When police approached him, Michael agreed to speak and denied any romantic involvement with Michelle. He insisted he had nothing to do with Nathan's murder. But digital evidence quickly raised concerns. Text messages exchanged between Michelle and Michael triggered immediate red flags. Just before the shooting, Michael had sent a cryptic message referring to a contract and a client named Van Dyke, language investigators believed was coded. At 11:12 p.m., minutes before Nathan was shot, Michael texted Michelle that he hoped she was feeling better and that he expected to finish the Van Dyke contract by morning because it had been a headache. 2 minutes later, he sent another message thanking her for her help and asking if she needed rest. To detectives, the messages were chilling. At 11:19 p.m., just minutes after Nathan rushed out the door, Michelle texted Michael. She said she had taken her medication and was going back to sleep, but added that her husband had just left. What alarmed investigators was her casual reference to the contract being late, reinforcing the belief that the messages were more than a coincidence. The language suggested coordination, secrecy, and a conspiracy that extended far beyond a random shooting. When questioned, Michael offered an alibi. He claimed that earlier that evening, around 9 p.m., he had been at a department store where he met a woman named Shannon, a former adult film actress. According to Michael, the two felt an instant connection and checked in to the Sunset Station Hotel for a one-night encounter, arriving around 11 p.m., a timeline that would have placed him away from the crime scene. With no immediate evidence to contradict his story, detectives released him while they worked to verify the details. Then the case took a dramatic turn. A woman came forward. It was Shannon. Initially fearful and requesting anonymity, she told investigators that Michael's story was a lie. Tearful, she admitted she had been pressured into providing a false alibi in exchange for a small amount of money. Her account introduced two new names into the investigation, Jessica and her partner Corey, a seasoned criminal with a lengthy record that included robbery, auto theft, armed robbery, grand theft, and credit card fraud. According to Shannon, on the night of the murder, Shannon and Michael had been at Jessica and Corey's apartment in Henderson. Around 11 p.m., Michael and Corey left together in a black Cadillac. Jessica told Shannon the men were going after a heroin dealer and needed her to serve as their alibi. While they were gone, Jessica lit a fire in the fireplace. When the men returned, Shannon watched as clothing was burned, phones were destroyed, including her own, and bleach was used to clean the apartment. Air freshener was sprayed throughout to mask the smell. She was instructed to repeat their version of events if questioned by police. The most chilling moment came when Shannon overheard one of the men admit that he had shot Nathan. It had not been a robbery. It was a planned execution. Investigators moved quickly to verify her claims. Surveillance footage from the Sunset Station Hotel confirmed that Shannon and Michael did enter together, but not at 11 p.m. They arrived roughly 40 minutes after the shooting had already occurred. Michael's alibi collapsed. Armed with Shannon's statement, detectives obtained a search warrant for Jessica and Corey's apartment. Inside, they found latex gloves, bottles of air freshener from the same store previously mentioned, and remnants of burned clothing, evidence that aligned precisely with Shannon's account.
Attention soon returned to Michelle. During another interrogation, she finally admitted what investigators had long suspected. She confessed to having an affair with Michael Rodriguez and acknowledged that he had pushed for her husband's death. The motive, she said, was Nathan's military life insurance. Together, she and Michael believed that once Nathan was gone, they could begin a new life. Michelle attempted to minimize her role. She claimed she felt regret and said she tried to undermine the plan, insisting she never unlocked Nathan's truck and deliberately turned off his alarm in hopes he would miss his shift and avoid the ambush. Detectives were unconvinced. The text messages told a far different story, portraying Michelle not as a reluctant accomplice, but as an active and knowing participant in a calculated conspiracy. As the investigation advanced, Nathan's loved ones were left to grieve. On Tuesday, December 7, 2010, a private memorial service was held at the chapel of Nellis Air Force Base. His parents, siblings, and fellow service members gathered to honor him. Michelle was notably absent. Nathan was remembered as a proud aviator, a dedicated technical sergeant, and above all, a devoted husband and father. His brother Eric spoke through tears, describing Nathan as loyal, kind, and incapable of making enemies. The loss was overwhelming. Even as the family mourned, investigators worked relentlessly. Within 6 days, the pieces came together. On December 8, 2010, Michael Rodriguez, 31, Corey, 33, and Jessica, 23, were arrested and charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy. The following day, Michelle Payet, 29, was taken into custody. She was charged with armed criminal action, conspiracy to commit a felony, and conspiracy to commit robbery. In her confession, Michelle admitted to a 6-month affair with Michael and acknowledged helping plan Nathan's murder. As investigators dug deeper, the full motive became clear. Beyond the affair, Michelle stood to gain nearly $750,000 from Nathan's death, $400,000 from his military life insurance, and another $250,000 from a separate policy. Pressed by detectives, Michelle admitted that discussions about killing Nathan began as early as October 2010. She acknowledged that on the night of the murder, she knew Michael and his accomplices were waiting for Nathan to leave the house. When he didn't leave at the expected time, Michael began texting her. Michelle confessed that her replies, coded in references to contracts, were meant to signal delays, not cancellation. The plan was still on. She also revealed alternative plans they had discussed. One involved shooting Nathan in his car and abandoning it in an apartment complex. Another involved kidnapping him, blindfolding him, and taking him into the desert to be tortured before being killed. Nathan, unaware of the affair or the conspiracy, never saw it coming. Michelle was held without bail at the Clark County Detention Center under suicide watch. All 4 defendants were formally charged with murder with a deadly weapon and conspiracy. Michael and Corey faced additional firearms charges as convicted felons. Each pleaded not guilty as prosecutors weighed seeking the death penalty. Years of delays followed. In September 2015, Michael Rodriguez agreed to plead guilty to avoid execution. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The following month, Michelle appeared in court facing Nathan's parents. In tears, she apologized to them and to her children, pleading guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder with a deadly weapon. Though she claimed Michael had pressured her, the evidence showed deliberate intent. In 2016, Corey also pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life without parole. The judge described him as a continuing danger to society. Jessica pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and received a significantly lighter sentence. The final sentencing came on March 3, 2016. Michelle again stood before the court, admitting Nathan had been a good man and begging her in-laws for forgiveness. Prosecutors rejected any claim that loneliness justified murder, calling Michelle a manipulator who used money, sex, and deception while pretending to be a devoted wife and mother. The judge agreed, calling her actions insidious and unimaginable. He said she was not a victim of influence, but a central architect of the crime. Nathan's mother was granted guardianship of his 4 children. She said she forgave Michelle for her own spiritual peace, but added that the damage done to the children was beyond forgiveness. They remained traumatized, fearful, and scarred. Michelle Payet was sentenced to life in prison without parole. She would never walk free again. For Nathan's family, the verdict closed a legal chapter, but the betrayal of a wife who turned love into a death sentence would never truly heal. Thank you for listening to Real Crime Stories. Tune in next time for more episodes.